Hello and welcome everybody. It's great to see so many people here today. We're here for the BVSSH meetup, and we've got a special guest, Jon Smart, here to give us his talk on OKRs, which he recently gave at DevOps Enterprise Summit. And so with that, I'll kick it off by handing it over to Jon, and let's get started.
Great, thank you, Peter, and thank you for attending. I'm not sure if it's for how many of you it's the morning versus the afternoon. So thank you for joining. I'm going to share my screen. Okay, can you see that okay? A little bit of feedback there. Can you see that okay? Yes, I see a thumbs up. All right, good. So as Peter said, I'm going to do a replay of the DevOps Enterprise Summit talk, which I gave a couple of weeks ago, and it's on the topic of OKRs. In terms of me, so my name's Jon Smart. I help organizations to deliver better value sooner, safer, and happier. I'm the lead author of Sooner, Safer, Happier, previously leading ways of working at Barclays Bank, and I've been an agile and lean practitioner since the early 1990s. I'm going to talk about okay and not okay OKRs. I'm going to share some lessons learned the hard way, mistakes that I've made, and I'm going to talk about the 3 M's, mindset, mission, and measurement. So we'll take a look at what are OKRs. We will look at okay OKRs and not okay OKRs, with a bit of inspiration there from Radiohead, OK Computer, OK Not Okay. And we'll look at OKR alignment, and we'll look at how to get restarted or started. The first thing to look at is how the popularity of OKRs is rising. So there is a potentially a bit of a hype cycle with OKRs at the moment. I had a look on Google Trends. I did a search for how frequently that term is searched for compared to balanced scorecard. As you can see, since roughly the end of 2018, OKR is a more searched for term than balanced scorecard. The one that really surprised me was to see that OKR as a term is more searched for than portfolio management, which I was quite pleased to see that. And again, it's around about the end of 2018. I think there's a number of factors at play here. You can see it starting to rise up. I think one of the factors at play is the publication of Measure What Matters by John Doerr. And so I think that, the history of OKRs getting more into the consciousness of more people. And as a symptom of the hype around OKRs, if you do a search for OKR certification, you'll have no shortage of certification options for you to choose from. So first of all, what are OKRs? OKR stands for Objective and Key Results. And I believe that there are 3 M's of OKRs. So this is something that I've come up with because this first one is super important. It's just as important as the other 2. And this is mindset. And it's having an emergent mindset over a deterministic mindset, and to have an empowering culture as opposed to a command and control dictatorial type culture. So mindset is absolutely critical. The second one is mission. Mission is the objective in OKR. It's outcome over output, and it should be inspirational. The third one is measurement. This is the key results, the KR in OKR, and the key results should be measuring movement and behavior. Also, they should be both leading and lagging. So some of the key results should be leading indicators of later value, and some of them are lagging indicators of value. So those are the 3 M's of OKRs: mindset, mission, and measurement. All 3 are equally important. If we look a little bit around where we've come from and where we're going to. So we've come from MBOs, Management by Objective. This is Peter Drucker He wrote about it in 1954. Lots of organizations embraced management by objective, a top-down cascade of objectives. Many organizations are still practicing that approach. So we're going to take a look at the characteristics of MBOs. Andy Grove at Intel, he took MBOs, he created an Intel version, he called them IMBOs, and then those IMBOs then later became known as OKRs. And in particular, John Doerr helped to communicate the philosophy around OKRs, communicate the approach as he went from Intel, where he was working for Andy Grove. He then went to his VC firm, and Google were one of the organizations who the VC firm invested in. And that's where Google then picked up on OKRs from around about 99, I think it was. MBOs are top-down. They are a cascade. They are typically focused on output and tasks. They are annual. They're private and siloed. They're risk averse. People will tend to underpromise in order to overdeliver. And generally, there is a command and control culture. And you can trace this behavioral style pretty much back to Taylorism and the notion of managers and workers, managers telling workers exactly what to do, when to start working, when to stop working. So MBOs by the book are top-down, command and control. These are the things you're going to work on. The pivot to OKRs is both OKRs are both top-down and bottom-up. Now, could you put yourself on mute, please, if you're not? Thank you. OKRs are both top-down and bottom-up, so they're not just a top-down cascade. They have a focus on outcomes and experiments as opposed to outputs and tasks. They are multi-year, annual, and quarterly, so they have nested cadences. They're transparent and aligned, so there should be visibility. It should be easy to find out what OKRs exist and who's working on what. They should be aspirational, so some of them should be moonshots. And the prevailing culture should be one of empowerment and autonomy. So teams have a very clear outcome to achieve and are empowered to figure out within certain minimal viable guardrails as to how they're going to best achieve those outcomes. So there is a big shift in the mindset and the approach for OKRs. With a charitable intent, there are many organizations, in my experience, as I help organizations on this journey, who will write or have OKRs written with the characteristics on the left-hand side of the page. So there are many organizations that will say, yes, we're doing OKRs, yes, we have OKRs, but when you look at them, they are basically a list of projects, or they're top-down cascade, and it's new labels on the same old behavior. Again, with a charitable intent, you can kind of understand that because it takes time to unlearn and relearn. Pace of change. The pace of change is the speed of unlearning. And so that's often observed on the left, and that's a not okay OKR. On the right, you have an okay OKR. Typically, it takes 3 to 4 quarterly cycles to get your OKRs to be written well and to have more of the mindset on the right. So now we're going to take a closer look at okay and not okay OKRs. So this is an example. This is an example of a good OKR. It's annual. It's annual for 2021, so it has a date. The objective is #1 market share in Latin America for this fictitious company. It's a fictitious company with a product. This company wants to have the #1 market share in Latin America. If we look at the patterns, in terms of the mission, the objective, it is an outcome over output. Market share in Latin America is an outcome. It isn't we're going to build this thing, and this thing in order to get there. It isn't a project deliverable, it's an outcome. Secondly, it is inspirational and aspirational. It is a North Star goal of being #1 for market share. Next, we have the measurement, the key results. All of them are measurable, and they are all written in this format of verb measure from X to Y. I like using this format. I like this format because it really makes you articulate very clearly what it is you're going to do. So double, increase, decrease, grow is the first word. The measure is the second one. So for example, advertising click-through rate, customer net promoter score, referrals, daily digital transactions, market share. So it makes the measure very, very clear, and forcing yourself to articulate the from and the to means that you have to be able to be measuring it at the beginning, and you need to know where you are now. It forces you to baseline the measure. So for example, number 2, increase customer net promoter score from +40 to +60. So obviously we already know it's at +40. A common anti-pattern is you'll see key results which are very woolly, very fluffy, increased customer happiness with no measure, no baseline. It's very hard to then be able to articulate an improvement on that key result. Measures of behavior is important as well. If people don't change their behavior, the outcome will be the same. There won't be any change. So to achieve an objective, there needs to be a change in behavior. So for example, referrals, number 3, increase referrals from 50,000 to 100,000 per month. And this is referring a friend, for example, customer referrals, word of mouth. So that requires a behavior change. Doubling the advertising click-through rate requires a behavior change. More people need to click on more adverts. So it's important to think about behaviors in the key results. Also, you need to think about leading and lagging measures. Measures 1 to 4, key result 1 to 4 are leading, and number 5 is a lagging measure. So more increases on the online advertising is a leading measure. Happiness going up is a leading measure to market share. Word of mouth referrals is a leading indicator to market share, and growing daily transactions online is another leading indicator of market share. And finally, you have the measure of market share. The idea here is you want an early and often feedback loop. So if you see that happiness is not going up, there is no more word of mouth referrals, there's no more transactions, and there's no more clicking, the click-through rate is not increased, you're highly unlikely to increase your market share. So the point here is to be able to detect as soon as you possibly can, minimize time to learning to be able to pivot. So perhaps the approach that's being taken is not working. What can we do? How do we pivot? The key results should be measures of movement. So a common question is, what's the difference between KPIs and key results? KPIs are like health measures, kind of like heart rate, for example. Key results are measures of movement. So in the example where a KPI is your heart rate, your key result might be, I'm halfway on my journey from point A to point B, or I've walked 5 miles today. So that's a measure of movement, and your heart rate being within a tolerable range is your KPI. So you'll typically have loads of KPIs, and KPIs are not normally movement, but they are an indicator of the health of the system of work or the system or the organization. Your key results are around movement. And they should be measures of value. At least some of them should be a measure of value, value added incrementally. Happiness, number 2, increasing incrementally is valuable. Referrals increasing incrementally is valuable. Online transactions going up is valuable. And finally, increasing market share. And then there should be no more than 3 to 5 key results per OKR. Otherwise, you end up in metrics hell if you have too many things to measure. And finally, it's business and IT as one. When done well, objectives, whether they are annual or quarterly or multi-year, they are the whole organization together. In the ideal world, there are not separate IT OKRs and business OKRs. It should be all together. Even if you're a platform team implementing cloud, the beauty of this is it forces an articulation of the business benefit. What is the business benefit of providing hybrid cloud at the organization? So there should be some business articulation in there. Now an example of a not okay OKR. So the objective is to deliver Project Platypus, and then there's a whole bunch of key results. So the anti-pattern here is, this is output over outcome, platy what. Quite often I come across this in organizations where organizations have a whole bunch of projects running, Project Athena, Project Platypus. You ask people what value this project is going to deliver, and most people can't answer that question. They don't know. And yeah, I'm sure a business case was done, but it was done 12 months ago or 18 months ago. And so people have actually forgotten what the desired outcome is. They're just following the plan. It's not inspirational. The duration is not clear. There's no duration on this OKR. In terms of the measurement, this is a task list. This is like a Gantt chart. This is just a list of activities. They're not measurable. There's no measures of change of behavior. There are no measures of value. There are no leading indicators of value. There are too many key results. It's IT only. Again, what is the business value? So this is a not okay OKR, and this is usually what companies start doing at the beginning of the journey. Now on to the mindset. So in terms of patterns for mindset, I believe it is more of a philosophy than it is a framework. It's more a state of mind than it is a framework. So it worries me if I hear people talk about rolling out an OKR framework. It's culture over process. As I mentioned earlier, watch out for new labels on the same old behavior. It's about emergence, experimentation, and empowerment. And as we all know, it is hard for behavior to change. It's hard for a leopard to change its spots. If there is a command and control culture of fear, that's quite difficult for some leaders to change behavioral norms. However, this is the mindset around OKRs. It's around experimentation, empowerment, and emergence. And this is why it works so well for business agility and modern ways of working. They are top down, bottom up, and sideways. And the mindset is top down, bottom up, and sideways. Less is more, no more than 3 to 5 OKRs per value stream. There should be a regular cadence to reflect and pivot. On the cadence, what I have found to work, having done this at scale across tens of thousands of people, I found a monthly cadence on the quarterly outcomes to work best, and a quarterly cadence on the annual outcomes, and so on. And like I said before, it's business and IT together delivering business outcomes. And it works really well when you end up having a conversation around the virtual table or the real table, where you've got our business, IT, finance, compliance, marketing, sales, product, and you've got a shared business outcome, which you're all working towards. Now moving on to OKR alignment. So especially as you get into scale, and especially if your organization is bigger than a one product company, there is a need to align OKRs. So first of all, if we look at the double click on an OKR and what it's comprised of, I like to use the word experiment. So you've got a 3-month OKR, and then you can break that down into monthly experiments. Another word that is often used there might be epic, it might be feature, it might be initiative. The word that I like the least is feature, because that's immediately constraining your thought process to a predetermined solution. It depends what you're building. It depends on your environment, your context, whether you need to commit to a bunch of features in a 3-month time period or whether you don't. In my personal experience, it is less often rather than more often that organizations absolutely have to commit to feature, 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 feature. Rather, it's running experiments to achieve an outcome. Or if experiment is too scary a word for your organization or for an organization that you're working at or supporting or coaching, then the word initiative I find is quite a good word. But you're trying to slice the elephant. So elephant carpaccio, you've got a monthly slice. Within the monthly slice, then you'll have weekly iterations if you're taking an iteration-based approach. and you'll have daily stories and hourly tasks. And maybe you're taking a single piece flow approach, in which case you might not have the iterations. When you group them up, your quarterly OKRs align to an annual OKR. And depending on the size of the organization, you may have multiple annual OKRs, typically no more than 3 to 5 per value stream, per team of team or team of team of teams. If you have a larger organization, that'll group up into multi-year OKRs. So now you're getting into strategy alignment. These are our multi-year desired outcomes. And for very large companies where you've got a group level with multiple business units, you'll have your group level strategic objectives. On the left, you've got continuous strategy alignment. It's top down and bottom up. And on the right, you've got a regular feedback on your benefits, on your value. You've got regular value realization. If we looked at a worked example, so this is Burberry or Louis Vuitton or Chanel. So we take a luxury brand. The multi-year outcome at the top is to be a top 3 most valuable luxury brand. If we look at the value streams within that, we've got fragrances and we've got luxury bags. So the multi-year outcome for fragrances is to be a top 5 global brand. And the desired outcome for luxury bags is to be top 3 market share in China, with a view that achieving that will enable the group-wide goal of being a top 3 most valuable luxury brand. If we then slice the elephant down into the annual outcome, and we've got the handbag value stream, the goal there, the outcome there is to increase market share in China. Within a quarter, the objective is increase market share in Shanghai, because we believe that that is the best place to start to increase our market share in China. And then the experiments we're going to run, an online promotion in the first month, and we're going to hire some social media influencers to take selfies or take photos with our handbags and stick them on Instagram or WeChat or whatever social media platform. So that's an example of slicing the elephant into thinner slices, elephant carpaccio, smaller slices of value, with the organization working together as one, as our business. Finally, we're going to take a quick look at how to get started or how to get restarted. So think big, start small, and start. The mistake to avoid is spending too long in PowerPoint and not being very agile and trying to design the perfect set of OKRs or the perfect set of value streams. So think big, start small, and absolutely start. Broad and shallow and narrow and deep is my recommendation. Broad and shallow is your top level, group level strategic OKRs multi-year. And then narrow and deep is where you're running pilots. So that will be where you might run 2, 3 pilots, go down to the quarterly level, and really try and get it working. I'd recommend appointing OKR champions in the organization. So people who are there to coach, people who are familiar with this, people who are point people for this topic to provide support. The third point is to be patient and be resolute. To paraphrase John Doerr, expect to get it wrong, 4 to 5 cycles to fully embrace. The fourth point is have a community of practice, an OKR COP for shared learning. It's voluntary, law of 2 feet. You turn up if you want to turn up. You can leave when you want to leave, so you can share learning. The next point is the reinvention of the PMO. And this is where the PMO pivots from a project management office to the value realization office. There is a journey for the PMO or multiple PMOs to go on here. The value realization office, the shift here is from demanding Gantt charts with milestones to supporting the organizations around outcomes, and in particular to gather together the key results, the KR, and to make sure the organization has that fast feedback loop on the key results. And then finally, experiment and enjoy the journey, because you are never done. So enjoy the journey. Thank you very much. And now we can have some Q&A.
Awesome. Thank you, John. So do we have any questions from the audience?
Yeah. John, with the cascading OKRs, who owns those? And I know that picture that you've got is a little bit taken from the two-dimensional nested value streams and the initiatives or the OKRs. How do you assign responsibility for, or how do you get people to own those OKRs in a, with a hierarchy?
Yeah. So yeah, as you said, John, there is a subsequent slide which I didn't put up, which shows the intersection of the OKRs with the value streams. And so the answer to your question is there is value stream ownership of the OKRs, and in particular the triumvirate of roles. So three roles at every level value stream. And when I say value stream, if there is anyone on the call who's not familiar with what I mean by value stream, it's basically the team of teams, or the team of teams. It's a collection of people. And ideally, because it's called a value stream, it's organized around the flow of value end to end with multidisciplinary teams, instead of it being role silos. So that's what I mean by value stream. And then, John, to your point, those OKRs map to value streams, and the value streams are nested. So to give an example of that, I give a financial services example. The entire bank is a value stream. Within that, you've got investment bank, retail bank. Within the investment bank, you've got equity trading, debt trading, research, all of which themselves are value streams. So there is an intersection where at the kind of the lowest level value stream, there will be some quarterly OKRs. At the level above that, the value stream of value streams, the team of teams, there will probably be some annual OKRs. Now, there might be some quarterly OKRs as well. You never know. You can't be too prescriptive on this, but there will almost certainly be some annual OKRs. And you get to the business unit level, I would absolutely expect to see that there are some multi-year OKRs. And it's the triumvirate of roles. So effectively the equivalent of the product owner, the delivery lead, and the technical lead, which ultimately is the CEO, the CIO, and the CTO. Those are the people who who have the accountability on the OKRs. However, everyone is accountable for shaping them and contributing to them, putting them together so that it feels like everyone's had the ability to contribute to them. They're not a diktat done in a closed room by three people.
So you start as high in the organization, you cascade in the sense that the triumvirate of roles below see what their higher next level up of value stream triumvirate is trying to do. They come up with their own, and it keeps going down. They get feedback sideways, up and down, and sort of continue to iterate on them.
Correct. So for example, the executive committee for the group level, is that their responsibility to make sure there's very clear group-wide strategic outcomes. And then it could be the leadership team for the investment bank, where that's a multidisciplinary leadership team. They're the ones whose job it is to say, right, what are the multi-year outcomes for the investment bank, and what are the annual outcomes for the investment bank? Now we'll go down to an equity trading level, right? Leadership team for equity trading. What are the annual, what are the quarterly outcomes? So yes, it's not a cascade, and it is an alignment. So it's not passed down.
It's an alignment.
Yes, so it's not a case of this is what you have to do, equity trading. Rather, it's, hey, this is the goal above for the investment bank. Now you go figure your slice.
Okay, thank you.
Chris, so you got your hand up.
Right. Sorry, John, making the dinner here. Can I have a quick question about binary or sort of yes/no kind of OKRs? So one that we were talking about in our team just the other day was whether or not, say, establishing a partnership with another company that was strategic in terms of our sales strategy. Could that be considered a key result to say, get partnership agreement in place with XYZ company. And it's not just a task in itself, because there's a lot of things go into that in terms of the positioning, the formulation of the plan and the proposal and so on, and whether or not the product is positioned correctly, so and things like that. So what's your view on that kind of OKR, or sorry, that kind of key result? Just like a very much yes or no situation one.
What's the motivation for having the partnership?
It is a couple of things. One is to establish a sort of partnership in terms of sales network. The other would just be brand awareness, and there's a whole raft of things, but those would be the two main things: sales network and brand awareness.
So then thinking out loud on your scenario, if the objective then to increase sales? The actual objective is to make the OKR, I think as we framed it, is that our value proposition is clear and effective in the market. And is that, and just in order to be able to answer your question, what's the desired outcome from the fact that your value proposition is clear? Your value proposition might be clear in the market, but it might not lead to any more sales.
Oh yeah, so okay. Yes, sorry, it's well, I mean, we have sort of targets then in terms of what kind of sales that we would like to drive off the back of that. Yeah.
Okay, so I guess so if I've understood correctly, a motivator is to be able to sell more of your product.
Yeah.
And by having partners, you're increasing your sales network. And so therefore, I guess it's all growth. So it seems to me to be reasonable as a key result to say that a key result is increasing your partner network from 0 to 1. Yeah, okay. which equally could be increasing your partner network from 14 to 28.
Yeah.
And maybe in the future it's from 1 to 5. So that seems to me to be reasonable as a key result.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. Yeah. Yeah. It's just as a
leading indicator of an objective to increase your sales and brand awareness in order to increase your sales and growth and revenue. That seems reasonable.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, and when you put it like that it's a leading indicator that's essentially starting from 0 at the moment.
Yeah, I think that's the key point, isn't it? That it's definitely not it's not a lagging indicator. It's not value in itself. It's not valuable. But as a leading indicator of future value, then yes.
No, that's great. No, that's very helpful. Thanks. That cleared that up in my head. So we've been debating that for a day or two and just weren't sure how to go with that one. No, that's good. Thanks, John.
Great. Any other questions? Or equally, I'd love to hear your experiences. Anyone else on this call who's got any lessons learned, trials and tribulations, trying to do it?
Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say the only experience I have with OKRs is having them cascade all the way down to individuals.
Okay, kind of like a MBO.
Yeah, it was terrible. It's all don't do that.
I'll throw out there that if you try to do IT only OKRs, you're going to have a bad time. So don't get involved with that unless you have the entirety of the organization involved.
Yeah.
I had one question, and maybe it's just like generic guidance. Thank you for the presentation, by the way. I have your book on my to read list, so
right.
You get to keep your place in the list.
Nice.
OKR, the KR portion tends to gravitate towards monetary metrics. Or how can we influence monetary metrics? Do you have any guidance around KRs that like they don't have to be monetary? So what are conversations or ways that we could look at keeping them in non-monetary realms? Because like we're always going to have money. So
yeah, that's a really good point, Chris. And it's a really easy trap to fall into, and it's a trap I've fallen into in the past. And actually, what I've started deliberately just very recently trying to say, so I like to call OKRs business outcomes. Now, the risk of calling them business outcomes is exactly what you just said, Chris, which is you immediately think about revenue, profitability, market share, which are themselves are lagging indicators of having a good product and a good service level and happy customers. So I've been trying to correct myself, and I've been trying to say business and customer outcomes, or business and consumer outcomes. So I think if you can think about the outcomes from the perspective of the consumer, because it should be value. Now this is in the book, where what I said is that the key results should be from both the perspective of the value producer as well as the value consumer. So an example of this is, and this is a real world example, is we want to help more first time buyers onto the property ladder. So that was an OKR articulated from the perspective of the consumer, which is helping young people own property. Now, obviously, there's a vested interest in that because you're going to come to us to get your mortgage. But there's a template which is in the book, which has a circle in the middle, and it has the persona. And that's quite a good thing to do, is when you start with the persona, so be it young people, be it old people, students, rural, city. If you start with a persona as you write the outcome, then it does, I think, Chris, it makes you think more around the value to the consumer, which ultimately should lead to revenue and profitability, rather than coming at it straight on from revenue, as you're saying.
Yeah, I like that. Thank you.
Any other questions from anyone?
Yeah, can I ask a quick one, Jonathan, again? What do you think is the most legitimate criticism of OKRs? And what one that you can't easily deflect or answer? What criticism of OKRs do you struggle with the most at the moment?
The thing that springs to my mind, I think, is the same. It's the hype around the term, or the hype around the word, and then it being misused, which is not anything inherently about objectives and key results. I think it's kind of like the word agile,
yeah,
or the word innovation, which is people jump on a bandwagon and then just behave the way they've always behaved in the past, and they end up rewriting projects as OKRs, but they're still written as projects.
Yeah.
And so there's one organization which I'm aware of where the people who are in the value streams did a pretty good job of writing OKRs well, but then they had to submit them to the PMO. When they submitted them to the PMO rewrote them all as like they were projects.
Brilliant.
Yeah, which is quite disempowering. So that's nothing inherent about an objective and key result. So I think that's the biggest gotcha, Chris, is it's applying a traditional mindset, which is why I was really emphasizing the mindset point in that talk. It's applying a traditional mindset to this thing called OKRs and rolling it a bit like, agile, rolling it out like it's a silver bullet.
Yeah. What is there something that you've used in the past that you found gives the best aha or light bulb moment for both? Because if you take that in the two halves, you've got the business, let's say that like executives or whoever, or the PMOs, and then the value stream workers on the other side. What have you found helps frame that the best, that has given the best sort of aha moment for both sides, simultaneously?
Learning by doing, to be honest. Yeah. Just experimenting and getting it wrong and failing and then going again, and really learning through experiencing it. And so I made a mistake on that in the past, where first time round we spent too long trying to design the perfect set of value streams, and and then realized the error of our ways. So then when we did it for business unit 2, 3, 4, and 5, we just said, you know what, we're going to get this wrong, but we're going to start and we're going to pivot. So hey everyone, expect this to be flawed, and we got there much quicker. So, and in particular, I'm just thinking of a particular real light bulb moment for an individual who happened to be the COO for a business line. And for this individual, previously the conversation was, here's the Gantt chart, here's the project plan. And in the case of IT, you know, we're 54% through UAT, user acceptance testing. It's like, I don't give a monkey's, I don't care if you're 50% through UAT, you haven't delivered any value yet. So stop coming to me with these plans. We started having a conversation around, you know, the conversation then became around business outcomes, and this individual loved it so much because you're talking my language. We're talking about business, our business. So it really helped Chris to bring together business and IT. And so the answer to your question, that pivotal moment was actually by living it and experiencing it and having a regular conversation on the OKR. So that's I think that's another thing, Chris. If they're left on a shelf, they'll gather dust and they won't, you know, they won't embed, and the mindset won't embed. So you have to have a regular cadence on them.
Okay, yes. Really just comes down to people understanding each other.
It does, and learning through doing, believing through doing, I think. Yeah.
Okay, great. No, that's brilliant. Thanks, John.
Gloria, I can see you got your hand up.
Hi there. Figure I'll add a female voice to this great conversation. John, I've been a fanatical follower of yours a while ago since I watched your PMO journey at Barclays. And I'm really glad that you brought up the fundamental mindset shift, in particular with PMOs, because I believe it's truly a resetting of value systems. So to your point, right, PMOs like predictability, and what you're talking about at the essence of what I think about OKRs and outcomes, right, is embracing that, to your point, you're going to get it wrong, right, and that it's an experiment. So in that light, what do you think has been kind of the I guess the easiest way? I think I love the fact that you said, you know, start small and just do, right, to understand. But I think for me, I feel like the language, right, of Agile, OKR, whatever it is, right, is still very varied. And a lot of organizations just like the simplicity of frameworks and tools and all of that. But to me, I think it all boils down to language and the simplicity of language. So you're phenomenal at this. So I'm just wondering, like, what do you think would be like the most, you know, if you had to kind of think about the simple languages to kind of get that mindset moving? What are some of your thoughts on that? Sorry for the long question.
No, that's all right. That's great. Thank you, Gloria. And I strongly agree with your observation around language and how important language is. Quite often what I experience is certain people who are put off by the language. I'm sure we've all experienced that. And what I hear is, this is all jargon. So that jargon word comes up. Thank you, Mark. That jargon word comes up, and it's like, and so the use of language is really, really, really important. And recognizing who you're talking to and the level of learning or where that person is at is really important. And then in my personal experience, I don't think it's a case of, you know, one size fits all on the language. Even I think it's whatever language on the whole resonates with the organization. So, for example, mission, fleet, tribe, value stream. Those are 4 words for the same thing. But I think it's more important that it works in the psychology of the organization.
That's great. I'm a firm believer of context as well. So thank you for that. And
Sure.
that's why I think it's hard, right? Because it's something that you can't replicate, you know, within teams or other organizations. And I think the other part is it's not something one person or a team of person can do. I think it's just, you need that holistic, all movement, which I think is really hard. So
yeah, it's 80% culture and only 20% process and tooling. And that's why it's hard, because it's about human behavior and it's about unlearning and relearning. As I mentioned, the pace of change is determined by the speed of unlearning. So that's what makes it difficult. And there are, you know, as per the book, there are common patterns and anti-patterns, but there isn't one size fits all. So it's approaching it in your context and your history, what will work. One other thing, Gloria, is having a coach inside the traditional PMO is very helpful in my experience. That's the approach that I've taken, is to seed a coach into the PMO, and the coach is coaching the PMO on themselves working with increased agility and more outcome focused, training them up, coaching them so that then the PMO is able to then coach the rest of the organization on OKRs and emergence and key results and value streams and everything else.
awesome. Thank you.
Any other questions from anybody? Should we wrap up for today?
Sorry,
Chris?
I have one more. I was reading something the other day, a Deming thing. Changing the system will change what people do. Changing what people do will not change the system. How do you keep OKRs from being just changing what people do, like MBO to OKR? It's still just goals stuff. So how do you prevent it from just being the next thing that people do to no effect?
Yeah, and that Deming quote is very similar to John Shook. It's easier to act your way to a new way of thinking than think your way to a new way of acting. So basically, change the system of work. And this is where I think the combination of OKRs and value stream alignment come in, and kind of collectively known as lean portfolio management. However, my definition of lean portfolio management is not the same as the SAFe Scaled Agile Framework definition of lean portfolio management. So when I talk about LPM, I mean, as we were discussing earlier, it's the intersection of the value streams with the OKR hierarchy. And so in terms of changing the system, it's easier to act your way to a new way of thinking. Is you're in a multidisciplinary team, aligned to the flow of value. You're no longer in a role-based silo. Your objective no longer is a role-based objective of, I want you to be the best business analyst and, you know, compete with other business analysts or testers or developers or whatever, or product managers. Now to, are we the best team? You know, as a team, are we improving quality, value, flow, safety, and happiness? And as part of changing the system, by articulating, and this is where you do need to articulate OKRs well, Chris, if it's articulated like the okay OKR, not the not okay OKR, that is changing the system, because those key results are things that no one has ever looked at before, ever. There's probably a paragraph in a business case that was written 18 months ago, which enabled the investment in the first place, but no one's gone back and looked at it. No. So what is really fascinating, actually, what happens here, Chris, is at every single organization that where I've worked with them on this topic, eventually someone asks the question, what does, Andy, could you just put yourself on mute, please? Thank you. Every single time, the organization eventually has this dawning realization of, oh, what is value? What does value mean to us as a company? Because the key results are an articulation of value. And when you're normally doing a project, you've got a Gantt chart and no one's looking at value. People are just looking at the milestone and the features, you know, and commitment, if that word is being used, you know, thing. So then it's like, oh, what's value? So then it's like, right, excellent, I love it. This is the existential question, right? And then the organization will go and do a little bit of articulating, what does value mean to us? Back to your point around, is it revenue, market share, or is it some other stuff? Now you're set up well to have your golden thread of value from your multi-year OKRs to your annual to your quarterly, and you can trace the golden thread. the golden thread, which could be helping first-time buyers on the property ladder. It could be most valuable brand for Louis Vuitton. It could be revenue. It could be market share. It could be corporate and social responsibility. So I love it when that question comes up. And so I think, Chris, the changing the system is by articulating OKRs as OKRs, because you're looking at something which you haven't looked at before on a regular basis.
Right. I love that KRs as an articulation of value. There's my head moment for the day. Thank you.
Excellent, excellent. And just to add to that, Chris, elephant carpaccio, a super thin slice of the elephant. So with those key results are articulations of value, and they are at increasing thinness.
Gotcha. Thank you.
I was right with you until you said elephant carpaccio, because, like, you know, that's not the visualization I needed today.
You're vegetarian. Zucchini carpaccio.
Let's try and figure out how you get an elephant on one of those meat slicers to get the.
Yeah. Any other questions? Donald, do you have a question?
No, I just love it. This is why I have a perpetual thumbs up. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Gloria.
You know, it touches on the piece that you were talking about around articulating what the value is for organizations such as FIs. When you have things like regulatory changes that drive such a large amount, or things like incorporating accessibility, which is big in the US and Canada and Europe as well. How do you get them thinking about value from those perspectives?
Yeah, that's a great super question. So I personally, the area that I was leading, we implemented 6 Dodd-Frank regulatory initiatives after the 2008 credit crisis. All of them agile, all of them done with this mindset and this approach, all of them early, all of them successfully, all of them under budget, because we took this type of approach. So your OKR, basically, it's not a moonshot. You have some moonshot OKRs, but you'll have some committed OKRs. This is a committed OKR, which is, you know, by the end of 2010, we have to have implemented the Dodd-Frank centrally cleared derivative regulation. Otherwise, we have to stop trading. You know, so it's kind of a non-negotiable OKR. And then this is where this point around elephant carpaccio comes in, because you slice it right down, and your articulation of value is, so let me give you a real worked example, Donald. Can we calculate margin on over-the-counter derivatives? That's an articulation of value, because that's in the regulation. And right now we're not doing it the way the regulation says. So a goal is the ability to calculate margin on a derivative product as per the legislation. A learning, what we did here is we implemented the most risky, least understood bit of the mandatory regulation first. So in the first month, we, you know, really rough and ready on a test harness. We took it back to the Bank of England for the UK legislation, and they changed the rule writing because we took an agile approach. If we'd taken a traditional approach like every other organization, they wouldn't have known that their rule writing would have put London at a competitive disadvantage to New York and Tokyo, because the algorithm was more capital intensive. So you know, especially for regulatory work, especially for mandatory work, take an agile emergent approach because it's less risky.
I think we're out of time for today anyway. If there are any other questions, you could feel free to send us an email and we'll send it on to John, or come along and join the BVSSH group, which you should hopefully all be in. And it was fantastic having you all here today. And thank you very much, John. Any last words for us?
No, thank you for coming. Feel free to, if you've got any questions, just connect on LinkedIn or join the BVSSH Slack community. And thank you, Peter, Brian, Dan, John, for helping to organize this community.
Absolutely, John. Thanks so much.
Yes, thank you.
Great. Thanks, everyone. Have a good day.
Thanks, John.
Thanks, folks.
Thanks.
Thanks, John.
Cheers, John. Thanks.